Just one will do.
All right, it is 12 o'clock, Tuesday, July 7th. The East Grand Forks Economic Development Authority meeting is called to order. Please call roll.
Johnson.
Here.
Black.
Here.
Blair. Pokrzywinski.
Here.
Grinde. Hecht.
Here.
Helms.
Here.
You have quorum.
All right, we have a quorum. All right, item number 2, approval of minutes for June 9th, 2020, the regular meeting.
I'll move.
Motion by Black, second by Hecht. Any discussion, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Item number 3, bills and communications. A, review of accounts payable for June 16th, 2020. Any questions on accounts payable? That's just for review. We don't need approval. All right. Hearing none, moving on to item number 3B, approval of accounts payable for July 7th, 2020. Is that date right, July 7th?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
they meet this evening.
All right. We need a motion to approve.
I'll move.
Motion by Hecht,
Second.
second by Helms. Any discussion, questions? Roll call.
Johnson.
Yes.
Black.
Yes.
Pokrzywinski.
Yes.
Hecht.
Yep.
Helms.
Yes.
Okay. Motion carried.
Thank you. Item number 4, reports delinquencies update.
We have no delinquencies.
All right, no delinquencies. Good.
That's always a good report.
Yes, it's good to hear.
Well, look at the circumstances, and the only businesses that are not paying the bill to us right now are those that we have actually given the opportunity to defer. They've requested permission, and we've granted that based upon the criteria that this board has set. And there are only like 3 businesses that have taken advantage of that, of all the businesses that we have that have loans with us.
Okay, item 4B, Director's Report. Mr. Gordy.
Is focused on what we're doing today with loans and talking to businesses and filtering information and sharing the information so that businesses and everybody here, for example, will see the information, but trying to sort it out so that all the stuff that I get doesn't get shared, and so you have some sense of what might have value versus what doesn't have value too. Because there are a lot of businesses that are out there trying to say, hey, hire me so I can do this for you too. And that's not, we're trying to sort that type of information out for you as well. But that was the main focus of the work.
Okay.
Other things are going on. I've been talking with some people in particular recently about a possible child care business. I've been talking with some people about the sale of more lots.
Okay.
So there's some excitement about purchasing some more lots right now as well. And the preparations for the Northern Valley Career Expo are ongoing. Presuming that it can be held, we're planning accordingly with some modifications. We will probably, those modifications will be announced later about how it will be handled, but a lot of what we have to do is wait for school districts to tell us what their requirements are going to be as well, since we already have something like 1,900 estimated attendees.
When and where would that be?
That is the last Wednesday in October. It's held at the Alaris Center, and it takes in almost 40 school districts in northeast North Dakota and northwest Minnesota. And
All right.
it's about 70 businesses participate as well.
All right, well, I know businesses have had a hard time recruiting and finding help. I think it might be a little bit easier after this pandemic. There's going to be a lot more people unemployed, and maybe the silver lining is we can help our businesses grow through having available help, because I know they were stymied by that. I know we were. So, All right, item number 5, unfinished business, there is none. Item 6, new business. Regional market capture presentation by Barry Wilford and Mark Schill. Can you hear us, gentlemen?
Sure can.
We can see you. Take it away.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for inviting us to give you a little update on the market capture effort that's going on in our community. We appreciate East Grand Forks being one of the funding partners in this effort. We expect that next week, Tuesday, we'll actually be releasing the actual plan for the market capture effort in a news release at 2 p.m. But we're going to give you a little snapshot today in terms of kind of what you can expect us to say in more detail next week. We did a similar presentation before the COVID crisis hit with the Economic Development Corporation in Grand Forks. So a lot of what you're going to see here is what we presented to them as well. But we felt that as one of our funding partners, we wanted to give you a sneak preview before it goes to the general public. I realize this is already going live, but we want to give you a chance to answer some clarifying questions before the plan is actually released. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mark Schill with the Praxis Group, who actually put together the data and did a lot of the analytic work for us. So with that, Mark has got a set of slides he's going to lead us through, and then feel free to interject with any questions at any point during today's presentation. Go ahead, Mark. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Barry. Say, could the meeting host allow me to screen share? So what I'll do is cover in 10 or 15 minutes, just get you a good synopsis of what we've been working on, and then leave any time if we hit on anything. We're happy to hang around and discuss or answer any questions.
Would you try, Mark, to screen share from your end?
Yeah, I have. I think I need to be enabled as a co-host.
I can't read the little thing in the corner.
That Corey is live.
Looks like Corey just popped on, so I think.
Okay.
I love technology.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's good to not let anyone screen share, right? Little safety.
We're all
There
wearing,
we go.
We're all wearing
Got it.
pants here.
Your audio sounds tremendous, I have to say. All right, can you see my
There
white
we go.
screen here?
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great.
Too.
So like I mentioned, we'll just cover kind of the broad synopsis of all the work here and some of the findings, and happy to discuss any piece of this. So like Barry mentioned, of course, we've got 5 partners behind this project, led and coordinated by the Chamber of Grand Forks, East Grand Forks, with the City of Grand Forks as a major investor. But of course, then the CDB, the Grand Forks Region EDC, and the EDA. So here's kind of the key slide that starts this whole discussion, right? And this is the curve of retail jobs over the last 10 or so years. And so you can see, this decline over here is really what's been driving a lot of this discussion. But I think what's important is we look at the other half of this chart, is we back it up to 2008, and we see that what happened was a pretty tremendous retail boom up until about late 2014 here, and then we saw the decline. I did add the latest 2 months of data here. You can see a little bit of a hit, about 500 retail jobs through the pandemic, and it's bounced back up a little bit here. So this is for the MSA, the 2 county region. So yeah, there was 1,300 jobs lost roughly from that peak to March of this year, and then another 500 here through the pandemic. But once we started to open it up and start looking at it, it's pretty interesting when you look at what happened with the Canadian exchange rate over this time. So over here in 2009, it was about 87 cents. Canadian rate first hit $1 right here in early 2011. It stayed $1 for about 2 years. It dropped down to 90 cents here in 2014, then 80 cents here, and then 71 over in early 2016. And you can see that it correlates pretty closely, right, with this boom in retail and then the subsequent drop. So we think that's pretty important, of course. The other key takeaway here is that, what's happened in Fargo is really fairly similar. It's easy to look at the Grand Forks region and think, our house is on fire and woe is us, but this is something that's happening regionally, it's happening nationally as well. So maybe not quite to the acute decline that we saw, but again, you see this drop here in the Fargo region as well, about almost 2,000 jobs through March. They had that same peak here in late 2014. And so when you compare, Grand Forks region actually looks half decent here in the last year or so. But over the 5-year period, it starts to equalize somewhat. When we include, so this chart here goes only through March prior to the pandemic, and it starts to even out when you include what's happened here in the last 2 months. Suggests a little bit that maybe this drop, that Grand Forks region lost some of these retail jobs, but they've endured some of that decline already, and that some of these other places, Bismarck, Fargo, statewide, and North Dakota, have taken harder hits in the pandemic. So again, when we really take a 30,000-foot look at what's happening in the region, there's a number of external things that have occurred, right? Just talked about the Canadian exchange rate. There's been several years in a row here of poor ag earnings. We saw state budget crunches on both sides of the river. UND had some major layoffs in the last 2 years. Certainly a little bit of the recoil from the oil boom and bust impacted the region. And then, of course, the national trends, right? You have this national retail restructuring. We weren't going to save Shopko in these Grand Forks. That business, they were having structural problems of their own. Same with Sears and Kmart and some of these other big stores. And what we're seeing nationally is this dominance of a few, the haves and have-nots. Target, Walmart, Sam's, Costco, Lowe's, these chains that have actually figured out the online thing and done pretty well with it are pretty much crushing everyone else. So, of course, you have this growth of online shopping, and overall, honestly, if you look at it nationally, one of the major trends is flat to no median household income growth in this country once you adjust for inflation. But it's really important to keep in context. Here we're looking at retail in this market relative to the nation. So this horizontal line is what the nation looks like. And so if this region were just like the nation in terms of its distribution of retail, we touch this line. And so you can see at the top of that peak, 30% over-concentrated, 30% larger per share of retail here in this market relative to the nation. And so, this decline has occurred, but it's still dropped down to 15, 16% above, similar to where it was here early in the 2000s, right? So again, I think it's important to keep in mind this is part of almost a cycle that's happened. No, the retail decline isn't a good thing, right? And certainly we've seen it taking another hit in the last couple of months, but that's also happened nationally, right? And so I would argue that this number is probably going to stay fairly steady. So we can do kind of the same thing here, and as part of the market capture project, we broke this down by sector as well to say, okay, are we high or low in particular industries? And this chart real quickly does the same concept. We flipped it on its side. And you can see things like sporting goods here are 2.5 times larger in this market than the nation, right? Cabela's has a lot to do with that. Shields, some of these big, dominant, successful retailers. But it gives us also this broader picture where there might be opportunities. Health and personal care is 20% under. Furniture is under a little bit. Then our hospitality sector, here's hotels up about 4%, and restaurants and drinking places roughly average. So accommodation and hospitality, again, before the pandemic, we don't have good data yet for post-pandemic. But this gives us a sense, right, of looking at where are we high, where are we low. We may not want to compete we're in areas where we're strong, but we may be able to fill some gaps in places down here that might be missing. The other thing I think that's important is very low on attractions. Museums, historical sites, institutions, things like that. And then looking at growth, same thing, same categories. I think, you see decline pretty much across the board. This is amusement and gaming that's growing a little bit. Health and personal care is up a little bit. I think what's key, though, to keep in mind is this one. There's 500 jobs lost in this category called non-store retailers. Well, what's that? This is Amazon in the market. Amazon was technically a retailer. They laid off their employees, turned them into contract workers in this local market, and that's impacted the data. So a good amount of this decline is due to that. The other part of this story, though, is that the broader economic development has been fairly successful. This is the line for manufacturing, and this includes the pandemic that hasn't taken much of a hit, right? Pretty strong increase, 1,500, 1,800 jobs roughly since 2012. That's a good thing. And then when you start to look at the concentration, again, same thing we just did for retail. We're not, as a market, all the way up to average. If you threw in the North Dakota State Mill, it gets it up almost there. But you've seen this increase where we're much more competitive now in the last 5 years in this market in manufacturing. I think what's real interesting is when you look at this, Polk County's manufacturing cluster, much higher than the rest of the country, 40% above average. And that's share of jobs. Certainly American Crystal Sugar with 2 plants in Polk County has a big part of that. But, you know, manufacturing in Northwest Minnesota is successful, right? There's several world-class manufacturers in this region, and it shows in the data. Why is that important relative to this? It's because that's part of what's helped drive some income growth. Here's last 5 years, up 24% in this market, up 30% in weekly earnings over 10 years, right? And so these numbers aren't adjusted for inflation, but again, relative to some of these other markets up here in the North Dakota area, that's a good thing. That can help drive some consumer purchasing. And I think the broader story here is, yes, we've lost some lower wage jobs, but we've done okay in some of these higher wage jobs like manufacturing, and that's helped drive up wages. Okay, so then getting into the project, we said, okay, we've done a lot of this data analysis. What are we trying to accomplish here? And came up with 3 things as a steering committee. One is quality of life, improve quality of life for current and future residents. You know, we're not opposed to recruiting some more people. We want to help sustain and protect the commercial tax base, and we want to attract more visitors to the region. And so we found, really working on this, there's several kind of cross-cutting things that really apply to all the work. One is to support everything with data. The second is to focus on experiences over anything else. Now, that's where we see retail going. Of course, the last 2 months may have upended that a little bit, but I think it just may be different experiences, that people are still going to be hungry for doing a lot of these things, and we just need to help figure out, you know, how do we adapt. Leveraging the universities and Northland Tech, of course, and that population. Looking at, in general, across the board, looking at underserved niches and then communicating with the public. So we came up with this action platform, sort of a plan with 5 pillars to it. One is to use this data to inform decision-making. The second one is to support the local operators and small businesses directly as well as we can. The third one is to focus on visitation and promoting the experiences that are occurring. The fourth one is to get new attractions, new experiences, new amenities, and try to boost what we have here. And then the fifth is some of these public policy, economic development recommendations and actions that we can do. So the first one is, of course, what really is driving this entire project, which is the data. And once we unpacked a lot of these things, what we really found was, you know, there aren't necessarily any mind-blowing major conclusions, but there's many, many, many smaller conclusions in that it's particular to a situation, particular to an industry, particular to an individual entrepreneur. And so we said, you know what, we don't want to write some static report here that's going to sit on a shelf, but what we want to do is try to build interactive tools with this data so that we can use it going forward. And so the data that we obtained from Buxton is kind of in 2 big pillars. One is we're using geolocation, anonymous cell phone data, to help understand who's here, who's visiting the region, what kind of customers they are. And that's all framed through, from Experian, this idea called consumer segmentation. And it's defining customers across 71 different categories. You know, who they are, what are their behaviors, what are their beliefs, what do they like to purchase. And so here's that breakdown, right, of the 71. You don't need to look at all this, but there's these major categories. This one's called the power elite, the higher income folks. And beneath that, there's several segments. American royalty, platinum prosperity, kids in Cabernet, picture perfect families, jet set urbanites, right? All the way down to maybe some middle scale ones, singles and starters, cultural connections, golden year guardians, right? So the point here is there's 71 of these categories, and what we're trying to do is understand where are we high, where are we low, and knowing that then what kind of businesses can we, how do we position ourselves? The second analysis that we did was looking at visitors, and it's really 2 types of visitors. One is the regional visitors that live roughly within 86 minutes, and that's what we figured could be day trip types of people, and saying they may come in here, do some shopping, eat at a restaurant, go home for the night. This 86 minutes is really defined based upon this GIS analysis. The second one is the non-regional visitors, the folks that may stay overnight. They live outside of that 86-minute window. But we found in looking at it that 75% of the tourists or visitors live within 300 miles of this region. And so thinking about this in terms of the pandemic, this is good because I think we may see a decline in air travel, but we may see an increase in car travel, right? And so this 300-mile analysis could be very helpful in helping us understand who is in this region that we may be able to attract. So here's just a quick look at what this kind of analysis looks like, right? So here we're looking at the combined cities, the regional visitors, the day trippers. And across this chart, all these lines are all the different segments and where we're high and where we're low. And the orange ones are the ones that visit here more often, and the bar is high, right? And so that means that they're larger, right? We look at the non-regional visitors, it's really interesting. This is the same region, but these are the people that stay overnight. And if you look at this, right, two very different segments. So the regional local visitors, these are kind of much more blue collar, middle income types of folks, where here we see the higher income, younger families tend to visit more often. Now again, some of these are still high here too, right? But I think that's one of the key takeaways from this is that these are two distinct groups that may have two distinct sets of preferences. Here's the East Grand Forks. We did a filter just for the East Grand Forks side. Same thing, similar for regional visitors, right? And so high here, but there's a few peaks here. Kind of interesting. This one is, let's see, Unspoiled Splendor. This one's stock cars and state parks. And so it gives us a sense, right, there is maybe a little bit different types of folks that may tend to come to the East Grand Forks side. Here's the non-regional visitor look. Again, similar to the entire market, but again, also very different here between the regional and non-regional. And so then within what I'm showing you here is some screens out of some of the data tools that we're going to go public with here in a week or so. So anyone could have access to drill down into some of this information. And so what this does is it allows you to come here and say, okay, oh, wow, okay, we're looking at regional visitors for East Grand Forks. We see True Grit Americans is high. We click on that and we see down here, well, who are these folks? Oh, they're older middle-class households in town and country communities located in the nation's midsection. And then some other information and data on that. And so what we try to do is position this so that anyone, or with our help, we can go in and say, oh, you're looking at a particular type of business. We can say, yeah, we see maybe some segments here that might be opportunities for you. Or you may say, you know what, we don't see the market and we want to look at something else. Here's another one looking at non-regional. This one's called Babies and Bliss. Upscale households, middle-aged couples, social school-aged children live in active family lifestyles in outlying suburbs, right? So younger, 13th highest income out of 71, and 9th highest kids at home. So again, it gives us this idea or this window into what types of households we're trying to target. Another one of the key things we did was look at it by season, and we found if you look at these charts, they're all very similar. So on this side, we're looking at winter. On this side, we're looking at summer. So here's our regional visitors on the top. Again, both these two top charts look pretty close. Here's our non-regional overnight visitors. They look pretty close, winter versus summer. And so the takeaway here was, it's typically the same people by season. There's not a lot of difference in seasonality into who's visiting the region. Another thing we did was take a look at, again, where are these visitors coming from? Number one, about a quarter of them from the Twin Cities, 23% from Fargo, a few from Bismarck, Minot, 3% from Bemidji, 2.4% from Duluth or St. Cloud, and then Duluth, Fergus, right? And so, again, just framing this in a little bit different way, we created some maps. Again, this is out of one of the tools we built. So you can go in here and say, I want to, what's this market? Let's click on that and see, who's coming from there. So again, what we try to do is say, how do we identify what are the competitive advantages and disadvantages? Again, this one's a little bombarding a lot with this screen, but it allows somebody to go in here and say, I want to look at these higher income groups. What's this one? Well, Family Funtastic, right? Click on that. You can see over here exactly who these people are. They even have names. They suggest Jeffrey and Angela. And so we can see, based on our analysis, we're 600% higher than average in this group. and it's about 1,700 households that live here, 2,300 households that work inside the region, and they live outside the region. So it's allowed us to go in here and figure out, okay, who are the targets, right? Well, we found that middle income, lower income singles, that's the college kids, basically, were really high there. But I think this one's real interesting. Younger, active, affluent families. Looks like a significant opportunity, and I just listed a few of the segments here that fall into that bucket. And then a few others, the middle income boomers and seniors, some middle income conservative families, higher income boomers, and then lower income younger families, one called family troopers. That's military-oriented young families. So again, so part of what this is to say, okay, in a broadest sense, what could be the best types of targets? And then the second question would be, what are the businesses that could tailor to those groups? So again, another example, here's a tool if you want to go through. Here we selected Family Fantastic. You can see vehicle preferences. They really like leased vehicles. They like hybrids. Let's see here's mid-size SUVs, yes. Not so much on upper premium cars, right? So again, there's about 15 or 20 screens like this that goes through everything from politics to demographics to cars to, all these different preferences that we can drill into. The other last kind of thing that we did was we were able to obtain a new data set once COVID hit that looks at daily data on visitation. And so we can able to track, that growth and decline that was happening due to the pandemic. The other thing we did, though, is use it for some general analysis. One of the things we did was create this infographic where these spikes here are visitation, and I highlighted different large events across the region. You can see for hotels, these major spikes. This one is that KISS concert that happened in February, right? Huge spike in hotels. The takeaway from this was between malls, sporting goods, restaurants, drinking places, you see these major spikes on the weekends. You see these major spikes that coincide with events. It told us a lot about how important some of those events are to drive business for the hospitality sector. And so, working through real quickly the rest of this action plan, that first phase that I just drilled into was the data. That's well underway, as you can see. This other piece is looking at supporting local operators, right? Assistance programs, know-how. We want to do targeted research using this data for any businesses, any East Grand Forks businesses that may have a question. We already did one recently for a developer that said, look, we're targeting this specific type of business. Could you pull some is this an opportunity? Can we pull some customer segments that might appeal to them? And so we did a custom report for them that they could use to try to recruit that company to come here. Supporting a collaborative and then innovate. We pop-up shops, fulfillment support. This one might become more important here in the pandemic. How do we find ways to support these small local entrepreneurs? Second piece is visitation. One of the key takeaways here, of course, you want to use the data. It's just as useful for the visitation analysis, but is we want to look at creating, and this came out of one of the working groups, this public-private campaign to say, we have all this marketing info that attracts visitors, so why not use that same information for our local residents, right? How do we create a tool so our local folks know what's going on during the week or on the weekends in our local community? And it's not just about attracting people, it's improving quality of life for everyone else as well. Another piece, fourth pillar here is looking at attractions and how do we grow from within, most likely, some attractions, identify those, support local operators, put a group together that may help develop those opportunities. And then this last one is positioning our public sector resources, our economic development, our SBDCs, and all of those assistance groups to support and do some of this work. And so we want to position ourselves in the public sector and support agencies as navigators, as connectors, as facilitators. We want to adapt the programs we're already doing and make sure that they still make sense, looking at startup funding, storefront improvement programs, things like that. And then we want to do some targeted invitations. We don't think we go as far as recruiting, especially in this retail climate. But there may be a few regional operators that, especially as the dust settles a little bit here in the next 6 months to a year or 2 years, saying, okay, let's reach out to some folks and say, look, here we have a market for you, and invite them to our community. So again, real quickly, retail is under fire across the region, not just here. It's these external forces that were really shocking this local economy. The story of retail is about a boom and bust, not just a bust. There was a boom that happened right before that. but there's still more retail jobs than average in the Grand Forks market. So but retail fell, manufacturing grew, wages are rising. And we look at why do we care about this? It's quality of life, it's sustaining the tax base, it's looking at attraction. And again, like we said, there's no silver bullets here necessarily, but it's many, many small insights. We're trying to do work here that's impacting a very complex system of this retail market of economic development. So what we want to do is have these tools in place so we can be flexible, so we can capitalize when an opportunity arises. We found these three key groups. There's differences there, and there's opportunity. You know, it looks like, especially that younger, middle income, higher income family group might be a great option. Not much difference in seasonality. We see the regional visitors tend to be more blue collar, more cost conscious. The non-regional visitors tend to be more affluent and educated. And the Twin Cities seems to be a major target of people moving here, or not moving here to visit. So we need to keep that in mind. Big events we found are driving business and hospitality. That seems pretty clear. And we found some of these local niches, these singles, younger active families, value-conscious boomers, middle-class, middle-aged rural families. So again, here's this action plan that we're launching here in the next week or so. It's got these 5 pillars. Number 1 is the data, of course, and all of these tools that we put together. But that's kind of a synopsis of what all of the work is. And so next, of course, we've got this public release event on July 14th. We want to continue this outreach with the regional partners, with you at the EDA, with SBDCs and all the assistance providers to make sure that we have the tools. We put these tools and this data in their hands. We want to continue to do this targeted research. We plan to reconvene these several working groups that are working on different topics and some of these issues, particularly that one on regional attractions and small business. We look at a partnership effort. Like I just said, this committee on attractions, that's kind of come to the forefront here, is how do we even use this downtime in COVID to say, you know, let's assess what we might be able to do in the longer term. And then do some of these targeted invitations to the outside operators. So, okay, that's it. Hit you with a lot here. I think, you know, it's been real good to have Paul on the committee as well as Daniel. I think Daniel, when you've been able to be there, has really contributed a lot to navigating all of this and some insights into how to do this well. And so that's really the summary of what we're doing. So it's this combination of data and then this follow on with an action plan. And it's really more than a plan. I mean, a lot of the work is already happening. It's just saying, how do we bring this together and put it into a structure that we can understand, that all of our partners can understand, and what the public can understand as well.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
I have a question. You talked a lot about jobs in retail and manufacturing. Did you take a look at education and healthcare and some of the white-collar jobs that we know we're losing and where we're at there? Yeah,
you know, a little bit of analysis there. Now, this project, because its market capture is more focused on the retail, the hospitality, the attractions, but I think certainly you're right. One of the things in this region that we've seen in the last 10 or so years is a little bit of stagnancy in healthcare growth, right? As nationally, that sector is growing pretty fast. Here, it's been fairly flat in the last 5 or so years. I think another one that's been a target in the region is professional services, knowledge-based services, that where these smaller metropolitan areas like Grand Forks, and really almost all of them in the Upper Plains, are trailing, say, the Minneapolis Twin Cities area in capturing some of those jobs. And I think some of that is just a structural thing where in the 90s, you know, a lot of those jobs congregated in the major metros, and we lost a lot of people out of these places to those regions. And yet there may be an opportunity here. I think what some of this demographic data does help with is help us understand, you know, especially the local analysis is who is here. And if we're high on a certain demographic, that probably tells us something about the affinity for the region for those folks. And how do we target, maybe if we're looking at attracting people to this region, I think there could be some insights here on, you know, the types of folks. But that said, you know, we've done some analysis on migration and have seen, even in our 2 counties in the Grand Forks region, a net gain from a lot of suburban counties in the last 5 or so years in the Twin Cities, right? So we're starting to see that kind of effect reverse a little bit, where the Twin Cities was the sponge that soaked up a lot of people in the 90s and early 2000s. Yet there's some decentralization happening, and there's some survey data out there that suggests, even in the pandemic, that there are people looking to downsize, and that might be an opportunity for the Grand Forks area.
Okay, anybody?
Well, I was going to add to that. One of the things that the EDC was working on in particular was trying to change the retention of people in the 30s, 20s, 30s, and 40s, because this area was so very low as compared to the national averages for those cohorts. And there has been great success over the last 5 to 10 years in retaining people of those ages in this area, and we're starting to see it with some of the information that Mark shared today and some of the information that the EDC is doing as they're tracking that information as well.
All right.
Absolutely.
Anybody else? All right, we've got, we appreciate your presentation, you and Barry, and we've got a long list of things left on our agenda. We got to move on, so we do appreciate it, and we'll be looking forward to the public release of this information.
Great. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, wow. A lot of data there.
To say the least.
Yeah,
You didn't retain all that?
I did, soaked it all up.
Read through the 71 categories and you'll be
Yeah, okay, yeah.
amazing how they break that down.
If I could have read them, they were too small to read.
The amount of information that we've been going through is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
It is.
And it just, you spend hours and hours and hours trying to understand, see patterns, and see where there are opportunities and where there aren't opportunities too, and knowing where you can focus efforts. And part of it is things that we're doing right now. We're trying to be nimble, and we will look for more ways to be a nimble organization so we can act quickly when there's a need.
Well, one thing to add to that, all of that though, is there is a tremendous amount of data, and going through that data and getting it to the right people, it takes time and it takes people to do that. So that's something that maybe in the future we might have to look at how we're going to utilize that data and, go through that, because if you just toss all that to a business, that's a lot to go through. So.
Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Black, for participating in that. I would guess by what we've learned and what you've told us that it was a worthwhile investment.
I would say so.
Thank you. All right. Item 6B, emergency loans.
Well, let me point out, we have 8 loan applicants. They are all current with the city. Valley Golf is requesting $20,000 because of the impacts upon the services they provide. They thought long and hard before they even applied, and I've been talking with their manager, Jeff Camadula, for months on this now, and they finally decided just before the deadline for applying for a regular emergency loan to pull the trigger and to look for some assistance in that regard. This one will be structured similarly to the way that their loans are, that will be paid over the 6-month period where they normally pay during the summer when they have golfers.
Okay. And they did make the deadline, so we don't have to deviate from our...
They did make the deadline. They made the deadline for applying.
Right.
There was an application deadline
Yep.
in early June, and they made that deadline, yes.
Okay.
And the loan committee recommended approval.
All right. Good.
So tell me the terms again?
It is $20,000 at 1%, 5 years, and then the dates of payment will be structured so that they pay the equivalent of roughly 1/5 of it each year for the 5 years, in a manner similar, because they pay 6 months and then don't pay 6 months. So it'll be the 6 months, then no payments, and then 6 months and no payments, the same way that they have their other loan.
And the first 6 payments will start next spring.
That's correct.
Okay, we need a motion to approve.
I'll move.
I'll
Motion
second.
by Hecht, second by Black. Any questions or discussion? Please call roll.
Johnson?
Yes.
Black?
Yes.
Pokrzywinski?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Helms?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Approved. Thank you. Item C, restaurant emergency loans. This is the second round of emergency COVID loans that we offered. And Has that period of application expired now, so this will be all of them that we'll get?
Yes.
Okay.
I have had one request where they bought it after, basically they were buying at the time when the deadline occurred, and they are evaluating whether to ask for dispensation from yourselves, from this board,
Okay.
to be able to apply, but they have not yet followed through on that.
Okay.
We'll deal with that when the
And
time
we
comes.
will take each application one by one and vote on them separately with a roll call vote. Okay, first one is American Legion. We need a motion.
I'll move.
Motion by Black,
Second.
second by Helms. Any discussion, questions? Call roll.
Johnson.
Yes.
Black.
Yes.
Pokrzywinski.
Yes.
Heck.
Yes.
Helms.
Yes.
And for the record, the terms for all these are 1 year, 1%, 5 years, first 6 months with no payment and no interest. Okay?
Virtually identical to the other program we had, right?
Yes, identical to the other program, that's correct.
Okay. Next applicant is the Boardwalk. Motion by Johnson,
Second.
second by Helms. Any questions or discussion? Call roll.
Johnson.
Yes.
Black.
Yes.
Pokrzywinski.
Yes.
Heck.
Yes.
Helms.
Yes.
Approved. Next one is Little Bangkok. Need a motion for approval?
Just so you know, on this one, I'll be abstaining. I can't vote. Conflict of interest.
Okay.
I'll move.
Motion by Helms, second by Hecht. Discussion or questions? Call roll.
Johnson.
Yes.
Pokrzywinski.
Yes.
Heck.
Yes.
Helms.
Yes.
I think you should ask Black and he can abstain.
Black.
That'll show in the record that he abstained. All right. Next one is Mike's Pizza.
I'll move.
Motion by Helms,
Second.
second by Black.
Wasn't it Jason, Justin?
By Heck.
Oh, I thought it was Dale. I'm sorry. Hecht and Black. Okay. Any
You guys
discussion?
sound alike, so.
Any further discussion? Call roll.
Johnson.
Yes.
Black.
Yes.
Pokrzywinski.
Yes.
Heck.
Yes.
Helms.
Yes.
Okay, motion.
Approved. Next applicant is Northdale Oil, gas station and restaurant.
Well, it's for the restaurant at the gas station.
Okay, gas station, restaurant, okay. We need a motion.
Move.
Second.
Motion by Helms, second by Black. Any discussion? Call roll.
Johnson.
Yes.
Black.
Yes.
Pokrzywinski.
Yes.
Heck.
Yes.
Helms.
Yes.
Approved. All right. Next one is the Spud Junior.
Move.
Well, you have two things on this one.
Yes.
First, they were not yet operating, they were waiting on last pieces of equipment to come in, so they didn't meet the January 1st deadline. Our policy was that nobody who is not operational as of December 31st would be eligible for the loan. They've asked that this be changed. The loan committee recommended that the change be made to March 1st deadline as opposed to December 31st deadline.
With
Or
just
they
this
had to be
one?
operating, and this business was operational as of before March 1st. And this will be amending that general policy for these loans.
When will we be amending the policy with this?
You have to do that before you approve them. You can't approve them, can't approve this unless you amend the policy.
Okay. So-
There are two recommendations for you.
Did we
Okay.
have that as the business had to be operational, or they had to be technically in business by that date?
They were in business and they were operational, both of them.
No,
On-
I
on
mean.
January 1st?
I'm talking the January 1st date, because like this one would have been, they would have been in business, they would have
They-
been able to open prior to that if they weren't waiting for a piece of equipment. but
Yes.
They weren't, so I was just curious, did our guidelines say operational, or the business started?
They had to
before
be in
that date?
business. If I remember correctly, it was in business, but I'm not 100% sure on that, Justin.
Okay.
But we have the policy in here. Let's take a look at it.
I think being in business would mean you would be operational, because I can set up a corporation with the state and be in business, but not.
I think we should probably ask the
Operating.
lawyer. That'd just be my thought.
What? Ask the lawyer?
So I would say that if you're going to modify it, it would be operational.
Okay. So are you suggesting that we take on item E first, the loan rate? Oh, no, that's the rate policy. That's a different item. Right?
That's a different item, yes. Going back here, approval of policy revision for emergency loans to require the business to have been operating as of March 1st, 2020, which is prior to the shutdown.
Okay.
So the policy dealt with operational.
And I believe when we talked about it in the loan committee, the reason for it was when the actual governor's orders to shut down came about.
March 16th.
Well, so we were trying to, because we're trying to encompass the people that were actually forced.
Okay, so what do we need to do right now?
The first thing to do is you amend the date that they had to be operational from December 31st, 2019 to March 1st, 2020.
Or what you do is you just turn around and you make an exception to the operational date that you have as a policy, and just say.
Just with approving this loan? So when you make the
It
motion?
depends upon how you want to do it. I don't know if we're going to extend the loan program.
No, I don't think so.
So if you're going to just give them an exception based upon the discussion, that's one thing. If you're going to revise the entire policy
Yeah,
so
I think
that
if
anybody that wasn't operational by
Easiest thing to
Can
do
come
is
back.
to.
This is the only one.
back in apply.
Easiest thing to do is to have a motion that includes this date as the,
No, I mean, you could make a motion to.
Essentially, are we going to do
approve
an
this as
exception? Or are we going to change the parameters that we set forth to begin with?
Well,
And
this is,
that'll be universal across the board.
but this is the only business that will have been affected,
right.
okay? So, and the other thing is we've already closed the date, but this was the only business that would have been affected. And they would have been operational, they were in business but not open for business on January 1st because they were doing all the renovations inside the structure.
I just have a simple question. What do we need to do to get this loan approved? What do we need to do to move things along?
Hearing Ron, we have two options.
I want the easy
One option is to approve an exception to the rule that we established, recognizing that they were in business but not yet open for business as of December 31st. The second is changing the overall policy to say that we are changing the date from December 31st.
My preference is to do the first option.
The exception?
Exception.
Question, is that going to make a difference on how we phrase it at our loan committee? We phrased it on the second deal that we change it to March 1st. Is that going to make a difference that it matters what we do here?
Yeah.
Okay,
The
good
committee
enough.
makes
Following them.
recommendations, it doesn't adopt policy.
Yep,
And we can change those recommendations.
yep.
So, all
So
right.
the second one is if we take the exception, we can approve this, and as a condition, we include an exception to recognize that they were in business but not yet open on December 31st. And we take this as an exception to adopted policy.
Okay,
So you want a motion
what he said.
to the exception of the policy so we can approve,
Motion to approve
yep,
With the exception.
with the exception,
that for this business, because they were operating but not open
Operation.
for business, that they be allowed to receive one of these loans.
Okay, did you get that, Brenda?
I think so, yeah.
That's the motion I'll make.
We need a second.
I'll second.
Second by Hecht. Any further discussion? Thank you. I'll call roll.
Johnson,
Yes.
Black,
Yes.
Pokrzywinski.
Yes.
Hecht,
Yes.
Helms.
Yes.
All right, approved. That was easy. Next one is Up North Pizza Pub.
I got a question, though. I just wanted to, on Mr. LaRock, did the loan committee ever ask him to clarify his application? Because I don't believe it can be possibly accurate.
The loan committee did not.
For this, bud?
Yeah. Because if you,
Accurate?
well, if you look at the average gross monthly income prior to COVID, it says $94,087, and they weren't even open until March. That would give you an estimate on 12 months of over $1 million in annual revenue. And if you look at the other applications.
Right,
It
yep.
just can't be accurate. So I was just curious if anybody asked him to.
No, I didn't look at it.
But he was up and running before COVID, right?
It's,
I thought you said he was up and running after March 1st or something.
No.
They opened like first week in January.
The reason to
But
move
still-
it, that we were considering moving it to March 1st was just to correspond better with what the governor's orders were so that it would kind of do a capture-all.
Okay. I just know that it's not possible to have $94,000 when you're comparing it to a month, when you're comparing it to the others.
It kind of depends, though, if they had a grand opening. I don't know if they would have done that much or not. I know what you're saying and asking, but
Well, that means by April 1st, they would have had $400,000 worth of sales.
yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I'm just saying that.
I'm not trying to pick on them,
No.
I'm just not thinking that.
We've already okayed it.
Well, I mean, it's kind
I
of
was just
similar
at-
to the same thing as the boardwalk in terms of numbers.
And there was nothing there for Mike's Pizza.
Yeah, because they weren't in business.
It depends.
I was just curious.
Yeah. All right, we're on up north now, right?
yes, and I asked that.
Well,
if you-
we voted on the amendment thing, do we have to vote on the?
No, you rolled
We
it
did
into
all
one
in
motion.
one motion.
Okay.
You rolled
All
it
right.
into one motion,
Good
Dale.
enough.
With regard to Up North Pizza, I am lacking one piece of information from them. So as we talked about at the loan committee, we've requested it because it has to go through different places and not everything was available through the July 4th weekend. I ask that there be a motion. If you make a motion to approve, do it dependent upon receipt of the missing documents.
Okay,
Okay?
I'm okay with
Like we
that.
talked about at the
Subject to,
receipt of the additional
I'll
documentation.
make a motion, we approve Up North Pizza with the idea that we get all the documents needed.
okay, second.
I'll second.
Second by Hecht. Right. Further discussion? Call roll.
Johnson,
Yes.
Black,
Yes.
Pokrzywinski.
Yes.
Hecht,
Yes.
Helms.
Yes.
Good, motion carried.
Okay, item D, loan payment deferral, Up North Pizza Pub.
Pursuant to the directions that you had given me, I received a request from Up North Pizza to participate in the deferral program for their loan payments, and I included in the letter for you to see that I have acted according to your instructions. I worked together with Mr. Galsted on that, and before I sent the letter, he signed off and basically said it was okay. And this is for your information. I'd like you to ratify the action that was taken.
I know they've been shut down completely for a couple of weeks because they had a positive case, and I think that's a proactive thing that they've done. So we need a motion to approve.
Please, or to
I'll move.
ratify.
Motion by Hecht,
Second.
second by Black. Discussion. I'll just say that, this thing has hit the restaurant business really hard. That's why we created this program to give these small loans out and up north has done a great job since they opened, and this has really hurt them. So I have no problem granting them this deferral. Any other discussion? Call roll.
Johnson.
Yes.
Blair.
Yes.
Pokrzywinski.
Yes,
Hecht.
Yes.
Helms.
Yes.
Okay.
approved. E, loan rate policy.
When we approved the loan rate policy, we were thinking solely of industrial businesses. And as we've seen and what's going on now, we're actually extending our loans in other areas to retail businesses. And what this new policy does, the additional paragraph that I added, creates flexibility in the ability and the way the EDA handles loans. It also recognizes that some businesses are anchor businesses versus non-anchor businesses, so that it gives you the discretion to offer a lower interest rate for circumstances and to anchor businesses. And I ask that you adopt this as a revision to the policy.
What we're talking about is the 1% rate that we grant
Yes.
manufacturing and primary sector businesses, that we can deviate from that policy and grant that 1% rate to other businesses if we think there's an exception to it that makes sense. And the exception that Paul is suggesting is an anchor store in our downtown would be one that would create the sort of economic activity that a manufacturing job would, but it's not in the manufacturing sector. So,
And all the COVID emergency loans that were done at 1%, because
Yep.
that's a circumstance that's outside of the norm.
yes.
So what it does is it creates a policy for the future, looking ahead.
Gives us wiggle room in the policy.
Flexibility.
You could say it that way, yes.
Yep.
I'll move to approve
Yes,
the
sir.
amendment of the
Motion by Hecht.
interest rate.
Okay, motion by Hecht.
Second.
Second by Helms. Any discussion? Discussion is welcome. Mr. Helms.
I would just hope that this would refer to 220 North too, if at all possible, anything up there for that or not? Is there anything up in that area that would?
Yeah, I don't think there's a geographic
Yeah.
restriction to where we would grant this exception. It would be a case by case.
Okay,
No,
well,
realistically, it's exactly what he's saying. He just ended up saying downtown.
yeah, well, that's why I wanted to make sure that it was the whole
I'm sorry, I
city.
didn't mean it that way.
Yeah, and I don't remember hearing him say that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Sure,
Thanks.
yeah, absolutely. No, this does
Just
not,
an example.
Yep,
yep.
yep.
Any other questions, discussion? Call roll, please.
Johnson.
Yes.
Blair.
No.
Pokrzywinski.
Yes,
Hecht.
Yes.
Helms.
Yes,
approved. Okay. Item F, uses of CARES Act economic development funds, if available.
The CARES Act included monies that go down to the cities and counties. The governor has released the share that would go to East Grand Forks. It's about $668,000. The city will use those funds for the extraordinary expenses that were incurred in dealing with the virus, but there's going to be money left over, and the monies can also be used to aid individuals and businesses, and they can be in the form of grants to help those businesses. So we're looking for ideas on how to use whatever funds might be available.
Do we know how much, that's going to be yet?
Carol and I talked about it this morning. We think it'll be somewhere around 600,000,
Well, I would give or take at
575,000.
least probably
But
500, but I mean, the city has about 60,000 right now, but there are some things that we're looking at doing to mitigate the COVID in our buildings. For example, might be the rinks and for fall, because the money has to be spent with the city by November 15th or encumbered. And otherwise, then we send it to the county, and the county can use that money for any expenses they have that aren't covered till December 1st, and then it goes back to the state by December 15th. And then the state has to spend it before December 31st, or they have to send it back to the feds.
And the county has contacted me so that we don't duplicate awards or activities for economic development for any particular business, but the county is not restricted to unincorporated businesses. They may also do businesses within the cities.
Can you come up with a list of options that we have?
Well, for example, I was thinking that, like, for the restaurants, they spent all that extra money for outside seating, many of them. That might be something that we, give them a grant for that, because we know that was directly related to that.
Yeah.
They have to show a need. The only thing we have to make sure is that there is a need because of COVID. So, my suggestion would be if we come up with something that we, have an application, just like we did with these, we could decide that we want these loans to be interest-free. We could decide part of it's a grant. I mean, the League of Minnesota Cities had a webinar last week, and they are planning to put something together more specifically. So your question right there, so the cities know what exactly they could spend it on, what other cities are doing that. That is supposed to be coming in the near future, like this, probably next week, on a list of examples. And so, once we get that, we can give that to you, but we're just, want you to brainstorm of things you could think of, places where there's a need that we could help.
And what's our deadline to come up with recommendations?
We just have to have the money spent by November 15th.
Well,
And
So, maybe our next August meeting, it doesn't have to be done tomorrow,
Right,
yeah.
but, maybe think about it, and, we'll have a better list by August of
Okay.
what we can
Give me-
spend on it, and
yeah,
then.
give me
if
the
you could-
amount again. You said the government.
We
the
received
total for the city.
$668,000.
That's the total that the city
Correct.
gets.
But the city right now has about $60,000. We also are paying, overtime for COVID and things like that. We have had a couple positive tests, some that have to be
So
quarantined. So
and-
I would say probably $500,000 that we could use to help businesses or individuals in the city.
So if 600 and some thousand, the city's only going to be able to spend 100 and 200,000 at the most. So 500,000 is left over to.
That's just a guess, but we
Okay.
cannot use it to subsidize any revenue we thought was coming. And so
Right.
it's very limited to what the city
Yep.
can use it on, but it's not as limited with businesses and individuals. We just have to prove that there was a need that was caused because of the COVID.
Just as you pointed out there, as far as,
I've got court.
Okay,
thank you.
thanks, Ron.
Thanks, Ron.
Could you send?
grants for
Do you have any appraisals?
restaurants or anything, the additional seating, I like that idea.
No,
I would
I'm gonna
also
ask them if
like,
they want me to
I
proceed.
would maybe
I don't
even
think so at this
extend that towards any business that has had to put things in place for personal protection for COVID. You see the guards at cashier stations and stuff, if all those businesses still have receipts on what they spent on that stuff, I think that would be a good use of that money for a grant. The
would
other
agree.
question I had was, could the money be used to incentivize businesses to come to town, as far as or it has to be something COVID related?
It has to be
Be
COVID
COVID
related.
related.
But,
I didn't know if us, as the EDA, if we could use funds to entice a business to fill some of our empty retail space, or.
Black.
Question then on that funding, could it be used to help some of the stuff that was canceled for this summer due to COVID, to help them get things into place for social distancing and personal protection, so that we can make sure that we have those events?
For example.
For example, like Catfish Days
Okay.
that was canceled. Would there be things that we could do to help events like that that are going to be coming up, that there's a possibility that they could be canceled, knowing that those types of events bring a lot of people into the community? I know it's a future thing, but if their choice to cancel is due to COVID.
But the money has to be spent before November 15th. So for like a Catfish Days, we couldn't use it for next year, but
Right.
for a new event, yes, we could
I'm
look at that.
talking about any events
Yes,
like,
any
you know,
new events.
Can it be, I think that Daniel is trying to ask, if I understand it correctly, is can it be used to make up for some of the revenue lost by some of these organizations who raise money for charities, for example, to keep them in operation so they can operate next year?
No,
No,
I was
I don't-
specifically asking, you know, if there are things that we can help them, like, for example, if they
Implement
need the
something.
guards to protect people so that these events can happen. You know, that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. If we need to make markings like on the street or something so that people know where 6 feet is. I'm not talking that these things are really expensive stuff, but for people in the community that are concerned about this, you know, they're not going to necessarily show up to those events, but if we help them to implement some of this stuff, you know, those things are big attractors for the community and they bring people from the surrounding region. when
But
we
is
have that stuff
Minnesota
going on.
going to allow those events still?
That's another possible.
Because like, we don't, I mean, we still haven't heard like if Up North Fest can happen in town because of Minnesota yet, right?
Correct, and they are talking about that. They're working with Polk County to see what can and can't be done, but, you know, your example for, you know, social distancing, if you look on the beaches, they only, you know, they have 2 chairs set up, and then they're not set up for another place. So if we come to the beach in Florida or California or Texas, they're set up so that that's where you go.
Right.
So that would be example, and we'll look at that.
I think
and
like
we'll work with Polk County to, if the event goes on, if that's something we could do.
And that's all I'm saying is,
Yep.
is like where he's talking about spending the money on businesses in town that get those
Yep.
protections, those events may need similar protections so that that event can occur, because if it's not in the plan, maybe the state would be less likely to have that or
Yeah.
allow that.
Like if Up North Fest was able to happen, say, funds used to set up hand sanitizer stations around the event
Exactly.
or something like
Or,
that.
you know,
It's like what you're
if it
alluding
was
to.
that
Yes.
large event, maybe they would allow us to move it like to the Civic Center. We could, you know, like you said, have circles put on so that people know where they can be and can't be. I don't know. But that was a very good discussion, and that's what we need to discuss and brainstorm on.
And we'll bring this back next month, to next
I
month's
just know
agenda.
there's a lot of people in the community that are disappointed that these events are getting canceled and stuff. And if we can do something to help those happen, I think it increases the quality of life.
Yeah. The worst part is that all these things are being canceled so far out.
Right.
Before we even know what's going to happen. That's the worst part, and I think that's what you're getting at, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And we're just looking, like you said, when Caroline talked about it this morning, we're looking for ideas. We want to have people thinking. The more ideas we can get, the better off we are. So, and we'll talk about this next month with the ideas we've received and the additional instruction we have on how we can use it, and additional thoughts on how much money the city will have available to do for these things.
Mr. Helms?
I would just like to make a comment. I think that, like you said, if we brainstorm and come up with some things, but I don't want to see us sitting here spending this money just because it's there. I mean, we want to use it wisely. We don't want to just spend it
Yeah.
or lose it. I know how it is, that you either use it or lose it, but I think
I agree.
we need to just be smart about how we go about
Yeah,
doing it.
and I
So
think-
if we have a discussion, I think we can come up with some pretty good stuff.
I think Justin's idea about reimbursing people for the cost of putting in place things that make their businesses safer, and shields and that sort of thing. I mean, masks, I mean, if people have to provide masks for their customers, those, I mean, they're only 50 cents each or something like that, but you add that up over the number of customers over a month and 6 months, it does add up. It's an additional cost that we wouldn't have. So I you know.
But, you know, again, you look at like Mama Maria's built the parklet.
Yep.
So they could have the outdoor seating when they allow the outdoor seating. You know, maybe that's something that we can reimburse for. You know, the other restaurants that didn't have outdoor seating that created it with the Spud, you know, Up North Pizza bought some tables to put outside, you know, and those are all COVID directly related expenses that hopefully will continue to help their business in the future
Yeah.
and have outdoor seating, because I think people enjoy that.
And I'll guarantee you they have receipts for them.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I also think that because they had to do it because of that, it'd be, if we have the money available like that we could use for a grant up to a certain amount, that I think it'd be good use of it.
I also like the idea of a grant more than a loan too with these.
I think
Well,
we're going
it
to have
has
to
to
do this
be,
as grants.
there are restrictions on it. If you do a loan, then once you get reimbursed, you're supposed to send it back
Yeah.
to the federal government. So,
Yeah.
we're looking strictly at grants. And just to piggyback on what you said earlier, we'll have discussions with Polk County and ask, can this event go on if we mitigate, what things would we need to mitigate? And then we can look at the cost for that and such. So, good discussion. Thank you.
All right. Moving on to the next item, the infill building appraisals.
We talked about the infill building appraisals, where their separation between the buildings has occurred, but with the real estate market being as it is right now, do you want me to proceed with the appraisals right now, or wait till next spring when things might be calmer and more normal, hopefully?
Yeah, I think property values are deflated right now.
Yeah, I think I would hold off.
I
That
would
was
hold,
my
yeah.
thought, is to wait.
It's
Do you need a motion
fully
to-
occupied, and
Yeah.
at least the rent's being paid on a deferred basis.
Oh,
Part of it.
All the rents we will have received all the rents for that building by the end of the year.
Good.
That are due for this year.
That's better
We've
than,
already
better
entered into
than
that
I had
agreement and
hoped.
made those arrangements.
Good. All
That's
right.
proceeding.
Are there any virtual questions?
No, this is something that I've been talking with social media, and we haven't done yet, but what I will be ending up doing is I will be contacting each of you with questions such as, what are your takeaways on the impacts of the COVID crisis upon our community, or things like, why do you want to be, or why do you enjoy being on the EDA, and questions like that, and we'll put them onto our Facebook page. Ideally, we'd be able to have a camera and you take it, if you can do that at home, like on your phone, and give us, and send us that. That would be a way to do it, but I will get questions out, and we'll do one a month, or two a month, probably one a month.
I want to go last.
Is this kind of like what Brenda's trying to get out of me for the last 6 months?
Okay.
Gotcha.
But it'd be just a case of asking some questions and communicating what our thoughts are with the community.
How about you just, a couple of us go out for beer and you just do Facebook Live,
That's fine.
see what we talk about.
That would be interesting.
All right.
It depends on how many beers you have.
Social distance.
End up start talking about.
We can
The
only have
most-
so many people there too.
The
right?
most
So we have
important
more.
action of the day, we need a motion to adjourn.
Motion. I'll second then.
Johnson and
Johnson,
and Black.
motion by Johnson, second by Black. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.
Somebody opposed.
Thank you.